Hi everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today, for some reasons, it's like fifth event this week. So this is an unusual week because we were not doing anything for a month, and now we're catching up. Anyways, if you want to find out more about the events we have, I think right now only one more event is published, which is next week, but we soon will have a lot more. So there is a link in the description. Go check it out. You will see all the events that are already announced, but in a few days there will be more. So keep an eye on that. Another way to keep an eye on the things we have is subscribing to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to do that. You will get notified about awesome streams like the one today. And finally, we have a great Slack community. If you want to hang out with other data enthusiasts, join our Slack. During today's interview, you can ask any question. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Click on this link, ask your questions, and I will be covering these questions during the interview. That's all. I will stop sharing my screen right now, and I will open the questions we prepared for you. So maybe you also want to open them. I don't know. Up to you.
Oh. I think I'll just react.
yeah, that's probably wiser. And we can start if you're ready.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. This week we'll talk about practical data privacy, and we have a special guest today, Katharine. Katharine is a privacy activist, machine learning engineer, and a principal data scientist at ThoughtWorks, Germany. I was really afraid that I would mispronounce this name. Like it's very mouthful.
Perfect.
Yeah. Previously, she held numerous roles at large companies and startups in the US and Germany, where she was in charge of implementing data processing and machine learning systems with the focus on reliability, testability, privacy, security. And she is also a book author. She recently published a book about data privacy, and we will talk about this book today and in general about data privacy. So welcome to our event.
Thank you, Alexi. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. And as always, the questions for today's interview are prepared by Johanna Bayer. Thanks, Johanna, for your help. So before we go into our main topic of data privacy, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yeah, it was a bit odd. I'm not sure if if you and I are contemporaries in age, but I just reached about my 40th year in life, differential privacy plus minus. And this means that like when we were first in school and in uni, we didn't have a term called data science. I've kind of always been interested in doing data science, but I studied math and informatic or computer science. And then I switched my major when I ran out of math classes because I really didn't like Java and I just liked math. So I did political science and economics to work on statistical reasoning and so forth. Then I went and I did public school teaching for a while. I was a school teacher. And then I left that to get a degree in journalism. And when I got my degree in journalism, I got hired as a data journalist, or what we would today call a data journalist, but then we just called it a news application developer. And I worked at the Washington Post, which is a large newspaper in the US. And
have very nice visualizations, right?
Yeah. They were that at that point in time, they were the largest Django. Remember Django, the web framework, the Python-based web?
Yes.
They were the largest Django installation in the world at that time. So I learned Python. I had never seen Python in school. They just had us work on Java applets, which I did not like.
Applets, yeah.
Yeah, applets, Java applets. I was like, can I just write it in PHP? Like, why am I using an applet?
Yeah.
Anyways, so that kind of got me back into data. And then I went and I led another team doing data journalism at a different paper at USA Today, which is a large national paper chain. And then I got recruited to go do natural language processing back in LA, where I'm from, Los Angeles. So I jumped at the opportunity and we were working on trend analysis and trendiness using natural language processing. And from there on, I kind of that would have been 2010. And then of course, word vectors took off a few years later. So kind of NLP changed greatly, which was really fun and exciting to be a part of. And around that time, I moved to Berlin and I started doing first independent consulting when I moved here. And I don't know how long you've been in Berlin. Were you in
Since
Berlin then, like
2000,
2014?
since 2014, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I don't know how your experience was, but I would go talk to companies that I would try to be like, oh, I can help you with machine learning and data science. And they were like, what are those things? And I was like, oh no, did I make a wrong choice moving here? Um, but it was just starting to take off, I think, here then. And
Yeah. So I was at university at that time, and then I
okay,
graduated in 2015, and there
okay.
were already jobs. So like I would go to LinkedIn, type data
Mhm.
scientist, and I would find some stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Probably it
yeah.
was like it took a year to actually for Berlin companies to realize what this role is.
Yeah, and I think like I was mainly working with startups, and I think it
Mhm.
wasn't on the agenda so much. So when I first came, I consulted some rocket internet companies and so forth, starting out
That's
like,
that were the only companies I guess back then,
yeah,
right? In Berlin.
exactly. And now it's much nicer. So now you can,
Yeah.
everybody knows what you mean when you say data science and machine learning. It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
And then at some point, I guess you joined ThoughtWorks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So after coming to Berlin, doing some independent consulting for a while, I founded a startup here focused on privacy for machine learning, where we worked on basically stream encryption mechanisms for pseudonymization, for linked pseudonymization, and so forth. With my co-founder here, Andreas Deves, the company was called KI Protect. And then after that, after I left that, I worked at an encrypted machine learning company based mainly in the US, but we're kind of all remote. And worked with some amazing cryptographers there, and we built a encrypted machine learning platform that was used by some folks in finance to do machine learning, deep learning, primarily on encrypted data, but also other types of processing, data science processing on encrypted data. We can talk about that more. It was very exciting. And then the company chose to go different directions. So I left that there, and that's when I started at ThoughtWorks. That would have been January of 2022. And ThoughtWorks was starting to see an uptick in data privacy interests and advanced privacy. And so now I focus a lot on public sector and finance sector work and advising even globally on new privacy initiatives that people are rolling out across the world, and then also leading teams here in public sector Germany to do things, build things with privacy built in.
Yeah. Wow. Like there are so many things you have done. It's probably easier to list what you have not done, right? So political science, economics, school teaching, journalism, NLP, crypto. It's like everything. So
It's
must
been
be a fun
fun.
journey, right?
It's been
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. Keep learning, right? You feel the same way? Have you kept learning, you think?
Yeah, but like maybe in a less entertaining way. I was just a boring Java developer, and then I saw this thing called machine learning, and then I decided to do this. So I did, and then I worked since then, and now, yeah, I'm focusing on community. So it's just a lot fewer things than you got to try in your career. But yeah, who knows what happens for me next, right?
I know. Yeah. I think I have about 10 years of career on you, so you got some time.
Like 7 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so this startup that you mentioned, KY Protect, right, that you and your co-founder started.
Yeah.
So this startup was about privacy in machine learning, right?
Hmm.
So what kind of problem did you see there back then that you decided, okay, I need to have a startup? And why this particular area? Why this particular domain? Why privacy?
Yeah, I mean, so there was numerous things that I think were happening at the time. First off, it was about to be GDPR was about to be rolled out
Mhm.
around that time. And I think that we definitely noticed some need in the industry to start to address privacy by design in machine learning, which I think a lot of people didn't know. Can we even do machine learning with privacy? How would that look? And then we had some customers that we were working with that wanted to train on data sets where they were going to share data sets either across companies or even across like pretty highly secure data sets. And so what this is also later what I focused on at Cape Privacy and Dropout Labs, the company encrypted learning. But the problem in the industry, and I still see it all the time, is you have data partners or you have numerous companies, or even within a company, you have like a highly secure data zone and then more widely available data. And yet the machine learning problem you're actually trying to solve needs that secure data. But if you could, you'd rather not send the data over or centralize the data. And so I think this is a huge problem. It's a problem now I've worked on, since 2017. And there's numerous ways. And that's also some of what's covered in the book. There's numerous ways. So one of it is thinking through link pseudonymization. That's probably the least amount of protection that you can offer. And another is moving towards encrypted machine learning or federated machine learning or both. And I think it's like a real need that will only get stronger over time, for better or worse. So now starting to see those conversations also pop up in the US, which is not really known for its privacy first approach. So I
In the
think
States, there is like a thing that is similar to GDPR, right?
there's a few things. So the states, each of the states themselves have started passing newer privacy regulation in the last few years. Some of the newest stuff I haven't even read through, like there's so many every day that are proposed and only a few pass. But California's new one, so first they passed CCPA in California, and that's to cover how data is collected and how it's consented to and how it can be shared. And then they actually passed essentially, I would say, an enhancement of it last year, and that's called CPRA, California Privacy Rights Agreement, I think. And this one essentially makes it a lot stronger. So the CCPA, it was only if you had a data breach could you be fined or sued, but the new one is actually going to set up, exciting, one of the first regulatory enforcement authorities in the US just around privacy. And that's they're hiring now. So if you're in California and you want to work on this, they're hiring this person right now. And you get to lead the first protection authority only on privacy in the US, in the state of California. So yeah, kind of
Now
cool.
people in California will also need to consent to cookies, right?
Yeah, they're going to have to consent to all that collection. There's certain restrictions on how the data can be shared. So like third-party data sharing becomes a lot more restrictive. You can delete your data, so you can request deletion. It doesn't really have a lot on portability, which we have here in Europe of like taking your data with you. But some measures around that I think are coming, and we'll see what happens. But
Because before, like, you didn't really have these pesky banners that you have like over your entire screen saying, "Hey, consent to cookies," right?
which now, okay, by the way, since like 6 to 9 months, if you don't see like a one click of opting out of everything but necessary, it's technically not GDPR compliant, because the French authorities came down and said, absolutely not, no more with this like 10 clicks to turn
Yeah,
off
it's like
cookies. This is not
I usually
very
just accept them though.
well, there should be a one-click reject
Uh-huh.
now, and the default should be reject. But yeah, it's a long road, as you know.
Do you accept cookies or reject them?
I reject cookies.
Mm-hmm.
I
Why?
accept real cookies.
Okay. So why do you reject cookies?
Because I think I've seen how the collected data gets shared and used in advertising optimization. And I'm not a big fan of personalized advertising myself. I find it to be annoying.
Mm.
And And so I'd rather not participate if
Mhm.
I can opt out.
Mhm.
I think everybody
Otherwise,
has to make their personal choice, but yeah, I think the default should be opt-in
mhm.
only. So like if I don't want personalized ads, why can't I just tell you,
Mhm.
cool, I'm on this website that sells data engineering books. Just show me ads about data engineering. Like, why are you
Mhm.
trying to show me ads about shoes on a data engineering
Mhm.
website? Like, this
Yeah,
makes zero
right.
sense to me. So, yeah.
Well, now when you say this, it does make sense, right? You just know what the site is about, so probably a person who landed on that website is interested in the topic of the website, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I did not think about that because I also happened to work at some point in an ed tech company, and we were those people who were doing this nasty stuff of collecting real estate,
And
building
you still
profiles.
opt in for cookies.
I do, yeah.
You want to feed the algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, after working at this startup, I removed that blocker from my computer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I realized how these companies make money, and yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. I'm I'm curious as to what your decision matrix is like there, but yeah.
It's not like I had a decision matrix.
Okay.
So, what is data privacy? So, I think we kind of talked about this, but we didn't explicitly define it. So, what is it?
Yeah, so data privacy, I mean, it's a huge topic, right? And so I have this one diagram that I use in the book, which, by the way, you can read. You can free preview on Amazon and ebook now, and you can see this diagram. And I like to talk about that there's legal definitions of data privacy. That's like a large aspect. And obviously, depending on where you live, there might be a different legal definition of what data privacy means. And there might even be like a local level or a contractual level and so forth. So there's all those legal definitions. And then there's societal definitions and cultural definitions. So there's like, when I talk to you and I say, hey, I'd like to make this conversation private, like, what do you understand of that? And what do you understand about the ways that we communicate privately with our families and friends and colleagues and so forth? So there's a whole area of data privacy that's just kind of how we understand it as humans and humanity. And then there's technical privacy, data privacy, and that's, the field that I work in. And it's kind of like, how do we rigorously define privacy? How do we measure privacy? How do we reason about privacy in statistics, mathematics, and areas like machine learning? And so I think it's cool because all these can intersect, and you can, take a legal interpretation and map it to a social interpretation and map that to a technical interpretation. And I think maybe your individual definition of privacy, is very much influenced by what sphere you work in. So like if you talk to a lawyer who works on privacy rights, they have like a very different interpretation of their own personal privacy than if you talk to somebody that's never worked in law. So I think it's and just like I working for a while now in privacy, I think I probably have a different definition than a lot of people. So it's kind of cool that there's all these different factors, and probably people move around over time and in their life. I think we can see that today with how younger people operate on social media and so forth, and like creating fake profiles or this or that and whatever. And other people who are really open and they share everything. They like stream their entire life. And so you have these different choices that people make, which makes it kind of interesting to think about.
I have a fake profile on Facebook,
Ah, okay.
but I was
What's your
afraid of.
name?
Well, my first name is my first name, but my last name is different. And the reason
Ah,
I did this is I was afraid of FSB, like this Russian security service tracking me.
yes. Yep. Which is a real thing. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I don't know if they actually do this. Maybe they do. It's
I
not like
have seen it. I have seen it with my own two eyes. So
uh,
indeed, I can confirm that.
but the interesting thing, and since we talk about privacy, is people still find me, surprisingly. There are services where you can upload a picture of somebody. So, for example, I speak at a conference. Somebody takes a picture of me. They upload to this service, And this service finds my profile on Facebook. Can you imagine? And then they contact me through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this was like, oh, wow, how is it even possible? Technically, it is there. You just scrape all these forbidden profiles or whatever and index them. Yeah, that was a surprise for me. So I guess that's another definition of privacy, right? So like if I don't want to be discovered, but people still do this, even though I have like a fake profile. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and this is like there's this concept that I talk about in the book too, and a lot when I talk about these topics is like there's this translation from the real world into the digital world or technology. And I think we haven't been exactly very good at figuring out how to translate privacy from one to another. So like I should be able to infer based on you changing your name that maybe you don't want to actually be contacted randomly on Facebook. But like there's also no which way for you to kind of tell Facebook, hey, I'd rather people not find me using these types of services. And the fact that those services even exist, like a
Yeah,
choice to opt out of them or
and that's
say, like,
creepy.
please don't do this, like for me at
It's
all.
not like I want to opt out. I want to, I don't know, opt in, right? So I want to be opted out by default. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want my profile to be scraped. Like, if I want other people to contact me, I don't know, well, why it did not occur to them that they could use LinkedIn or something, right? So that's, anyways. So there is a question I see that how can we find this book? So the book is called Practical Data Privacy. If you just Google it, I think the first link will be the book. There is
I
only
hope
one
it,
book with this name, right?
yes, yes, yes. I hope it's the first link. If not, then find it and click on it. So it'll be the first link one day.
But then a more certain way to find it is also at your first and last name, right? After.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Add my
Then
name.
I'm pretty
Then you're
sure
for
that,
sure.
yeah.
And the
Okay.
ebook went out yesterday. So now it's available ebook and the print copy should be available in the next week or two.
Okay. So I think we should reach out to O'Reilly and ask them to give us a few copies. So maybe,
Yes.
so right now we will record the podcast episode, the interview, right? And then we will publish it in a couple of weeks. So by
Okay.
the time we publish, the book will be out and we will probably have a few copies. So
Okay.
everyone who is listening, keep an eye. Probably when we release this episode, there will be some sort of giveaway where you can get a free copy. Anyways, coming back to data privacy definition. So you said there are like a bunch of different definitions. And maybe you can give an example, like how would a lawyer define data privacy and how would a data science manager define privacy?
Yeah, I mean, and really these two need to eventually agree, right? So like at the end of the day, what we want when we're working at a company, we're building out data products or services and so forth, and they're operating in some sort of regulatory context, which is all the time in Europe and most of the time in other places. And we want the legal team to agree with the technical team about not only the data we're collecting and processing, but how we intend to use that data and the risk that we hold in using that data and the mitigations that we have for that risk. And so it's a whole beautiful picture there of all the different things that you need to think about at once. And a lot of times the conversation between the legal people and the technical people can get really difficult because both fields use quite a bit of special words or jargon. And that means that being able to translate between those spaces is kind of like a superpower that you can build over time. And I think something that we have to really work on from the technical side of the house as data people, because a software engineer does not have the same depth of knowledge about data and statistical reasoning. And I think to fully understand the data privacy problem, you have to have some exposure to statistical reasoning and thinking about data in a real way. And so I think if you're a data professional, you can really actually start leading this conversation, because when we think about things like, let's think about privacy risk. Like if you're in the complete middle of a distribution, you're at the chunky part and the chance of you being singled out in any way, shape, or form is almost zero. Then your privacy risk is much, much smaller than somebody that's at a very thin tail somewhere in the
Can you
distribution.
give an example? Because for me, like, uh, it's too abstract to
Okay.
understand.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
say we talked about this website about data engineering, right?
Yeah.
Um, so maybe you can use the online advertisement as an example. I
Okay.
visit a website, right, and then there is an option to, have personalized advertisement or generic, right? In this example, what are the privacy risks?
Yeah, okay. Let's go with that. So Firefox actually studied this, and web histories, so the series of things that you visit in your browser, even over the course of a fairly short time span, let's say 1 week, are uniquely identifiable most of the time. And this is what we can think about. How many times do we all use some major services, right? So like you log into your email, you log in maybe to social media and other websites, and you do that every day. Even like news websites are quite popular, right? So that would be a large percentage of us just have those. And those essentially don't leak very much information because so many people use them every day. But then let's say you go and you click on this book link, right? And you go look at that book. And then let's say later today you look at 2 or 3 different YouTube videos. And then let's say later tonight you log into a fitness website that you use, or you go to a gaming portal that you use. And then maybe you go to a subreddit that you like to post in. And when you start to trail these, they become with all these data points together, maybe not any one of them, but that timeline of history together starts to become uniquely identifying. And that's been studied and proven. And I think yeah, as statistical people or people that understand that, you can start to see that to remain non-identifiable, you would have to really restrict and think about how you use the internet. And so it's just not. Yeah.
We called this thing, so when I worked in an ad tech company, so we couldn't monitor the entire internet, of course. We could only see the apps that users use, right? But that's enough. Like, it's pretty much the same. Like, it's like, I don't know, you use Bubble Witch and then you use, I don't know, some other app, and then, like, it's the same story as you just said. And we called this thing a user profile.
Okay.
And then, like, for each user, we have this profile, and we basically know everything about this person, right? Including geographical coordinates. Know where they live, which is like mind-blowing, right?
Yeah, I mean it's I think, just to go back to like the user experience, I think that the average user, even those of us that have worked in this space, like we don't actually think a lot about the privacy risk that that poses to people, and the fact that probably some people would rather not have that amount of private information exposed, or that fingerprinting via various mechanisms. And you could use browser signatures to fingerprint, you can use operating system information to fingerprint. There's even been people that fingerprint mouse activity and so forth, or typing flow. I mean, there's a lot of ways to violate somebody's privacy using technology.
So what is
And
this
yeah,
fingerprint? Like, why do companies use that? Because don't we like have other ways to identify that you are you?
I mean, yes, presuming that that
It sounds
you
right.
log in and that you participate, right? So for sites that don't have login, or for sites that want to offer personalized tracking for people that are not logged in and later log in. So a lot of shopping cart optimization and so forth uses these types of things as well to link profiles of logged in and logged out users. And I think what I guess, I think the bigger question here is, what value does it actually bring for us to know exactly who somebody is?
Zero most of the time. It's just creepy also.
It's like, what are we actually trying to measure here? And so I think that's That's like a lot of what I try to ask is
Well,
like,
the end goal would be like for an advertisement company is to serve the ad that the user is more likely to click rather than ignore.
mhm,
And the rest is not important. We don't really need. Well, I also remember that there are use cases for geographical coordinates. Like, for example, if there is a store nearby that has some, mm, I don't know, some campaigns, some
mhm,
discounts,
mhm,
then we can promote that.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm excited to see is I think there's a lot more thinking through intent-based recommendation. So what is the intent of the user? And how do we improve? You see this a lot with, I think the first time I noticed it was, I think Amazon and Netflix were both starting to talk about this, where they wanted to do session-driven recommendations where they don't, it's kind of like also a bit of a cold start problem. So a user comes, they might not have previous information about the user. How do we, given the way they're interacting with the site right now in this moment, what they're searching for, what they're scrolling to, what they're clicking on, how do we give them something that matches their intent? And I think there's ways to design these systems to be extremely privacy preserving, particularly if you use a training group that has fully opted in to being tracked, right? And then you use almost an ephemeral inference that you can just throw away the data when this user leaves the session. So you could really design this extremely privacy friendly if you wanted to. And I think that they were starting to experiment and showing, oh, hey, it's kind of almost better than personalization if
Mhm.
what the person's trying to do, we immediately give them what they're looking for.
Mhm. Okay, so in this case, you said privacy preserving methods. We do not necessarily look at this user profile that we mentioned, right? We don't necessarily need like your 5 years of browsing history. We just look at your session, right? So like last 10 minutes of
Yeah,
browsing
what are you trying to
or
do?
just activity on Amazon or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like I think people, especially it's been shown with research over decades now that if sharing my location right now is going to help improve my experience, I'm willing to do that, but I don't want to turn on location sharing forever. I just want to say, hey, look, I'm looking for restaurants near me. Like, here's my location right now. Tell me what choices I have. And then let me opt out immediately after I'm done with that search. And so I think there's some pretty cool ways if you wanted to build privacy into these things and to also
Mhm.
meet users where they're at, to let them opt in and out on a case by case basis. And it could even be something as simple as, hey, we'd like to use your location to improve the search results, like for this search, right? Or something like this. And so I think there's ways to build
So,
it in quite easily. Yeah.
so thinking about these things and incorporating them in our systems, would you call this privacy engineering? Like, as a term, privacy engineering is exactly about these things, right?
Yeah, and I think like so that could be some of the basics is you look at the data side or you look at the application side, what you're trying to do, and then you look at the privacy risks and constraints. You try to build out requirements that can meet both. This also means learning to talk with legal staff and so forth. But then also it can go even further. So some of what I talk about in the book and that I'm really excited about is privacy enhancing technologies, or what I often just call privacy technologies, where there are particular ways that we can architect or to particular types of algorithms or cryptography that we can use that can even further. So it takes kind of these problems and it takes them to the next level to allow us to do more advanced data science and machine learning, but also have an option for rigorous definitions of anonymity, for keeping data localized, so for not centralizing so much data, and for doing real data science on encrypted data, so where the data was never decrypted. And so all of that, those I think are the really cool stuff, but it takes a bit of time to integrate them into, as you can imagine, a data architecture and a data science workflow. And so I would almost always advise people start with the simple stuff, get that conversation going at their organization, and then they can move into more advanced privacy engineering. But I'm a big fan of broadening the definition. I think the definition of privacy engineer is all of that. And I would say use it liberally. We need more people talking about privacy engineering. So if you're listening to this and you want to be a privacy engineer, do it.
I'm still somewhat skeptical about this. So why would I, like, let's say, I run a company, why would I care about these privacy preserving techniques? Because for me, from what it feels like, that if I use all this information I have about the user, then I will be able to, I don't know, serve them with better ads, have better user experience. So for example, if we take Google, because Google knows that me is me, when I type something, it shows me a Stack Overflow article, not something else, right? Because it knows me so well, it knows what kind of stuff I'm into, and then the experience I have as a result is much better for me, presumably, right?
How
So
much
when I
is
type,
of that is personalization and how much is just a very nice search algorithm or series, right?
well, because there is a lot of ambiguity, right, in many things. Sometimes, like for example, for me, it's a Stack Overflow article, but for you, it could be like I don't know, just an article about something else. Because I clicked on Stack Overflow links so many times that it knows that I like this site more than other websites.
Yeah, I mean, I think individualized search ranking is probably something that Google moved away from a long time ago, but I'm not
I have no idea.
100% certain, but I'm pretty sure on that one. So I think there's some of that. There's also, of course, like some more real-time generation of results, which can change results over time. But back to like you're running a company, like
Yeah, why do I care about
why
that?
integrate privacy?
It feels to me that it's better without privacy than with privacy. So how do you prove me wrong?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few things. Like first off, if your product, I think there's a ground statement here of like, what does it mean about your product and your company if you can't build privacy in? And I think there's like a moral and ethical thing that you need to think about where it's like, if the entire basis of your company or your product is not going to work if you allow people to opt out or to have share less data, then what exactly are you building? I think that's like a big question to ask. But let's say you say, Katharine, whatever, we tested it and it works better with private information. I mean, what you need to think about is the managed risk that you hold at that point in time. So I've worked in finance and public sector now for a while, and therefore the risk appetite of the people that I work with is much smaller than a lot of industries. But I think what I'm starting to see also, even just ThoughtWorks Global, some of the things that are coming across my desk as one of the privacy SMEs of the company is that this is a growing concern for a lot of people who hold data. And I think there's a lot of companies that you wouldn't expect are thinking and prioritizing this problem that are. And I think the reason is there's regulatory pushback and there's customer and social blowback. And I think both of those are real. And if you can build the product and deliver what you're trying to do by collecting less data and holding less risk, it's just a smart financial decision. Because if something happens and you get sued, or if something happens and your insurer drops you, that's going to cost you a lot more than like the 0.5% bump that adding location to the machine learning regressor will give you. And so I think you have to actually think the trade-off you're making there is not zero risk, 100% reward. It's some balance between those two.
I guess for me as a company, let's say, I don't know, CEO or whoever, I need to rely on like data protection officer or somebody who can, or these privacy engineers that we talked about, who can tell me, look, keeping this data might be dangerous, like in terms of like maybe
Or illegal.
Chance
You know,
illegal, yeah, or
could
illegal.
just be illegal.
Yeah. But like a location data, using location data is not illegal. It's legal as long as like you have
As
this.
long as they've consented. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but we have to provide an option for users to opt out of this, right?
Yes.
And then our website still needs to, it still must function without the location data,
Yes.
at least in Europe,
For
right?
example. In Europe, and I think in Brazil now with LGBT, Chile has the new law coming out. China has the China law that came out last year. Let's see how it gets enforced. I mean, increasing amount of places.
Yeah. Actually, recently I had this experience that there was one website, I will not name it, when you reject cookies, it stops working. Yeah,
I see by design, everybody.
yeah. Interesting.
Great user experience.
Mm-hmm. So I heard this term called differential privacy. What is this? Like, how is it different from like usual data privacy?
Yeah. So differential privacy is a concept that we use to reason about privacy loss. And it's often used to think about how stringent do we need to be about the amount of privacy or information that we give out about any one individual in the data set to provide them with the highest level of privacy we can offer. And so in Europe, and in a lot of places, it's often considered also by legal experts. So if you talk to a privacy lawyer, they actually know what differential privacy is, which is really cool. And it's kind of the highest standard for thinking through the problem of anonymization. And go briefly through it. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cynthia Dwork's work. Cynthia Dwork, she was a researcher at Microsoft for a long time, and she developed some of the fundamental theorems in a few different hard crypto problems, and then also this thing of differential privacy. And she was, I think, working in machine learning at the time. This is quite a while ago. And she and a few of her peers had debunked the idea that data could be released and be anonymous. Because the problem is like we work in information theory. So in terms of information theory, you release information, the chance of the information being about individuals in the data is quite high, right? And then the chance that something can be learned about the individuals is quite high too. This is the baseline of why data science works, like you take information from a population, you synthesize it, you learn, right? And so what Cynthia Dwork did is like after they proved that there was no such real thing as anonymization from a scientific sense of the world, if you're going to release data, then they were like, oh no, we broke it. Like maybe we should come up with a new definition so people can still keep doing data, right? And so what they developed is this reasoning about the probability that somebody can learn something in the classic definition before and after a person was added to a data set. So you're building like a query mechanism. You want to give an analyst access to a query mechanism. The analyst queries before a person's added and then after a person's added. And we like to hold the probability that they learned something about this person who was added, or even that the person was added, within tight bounds. And that's the formal definition of differential privacy. And then that original definition has been expanded to include a lot of cool concepts like computational complexity, like thinking through the chance of a particular types of error happening in responding and so forth. And there's a chapter on it in the book. And I got to work with Damien Desfontaines, who's one of the global leading experts on differential privacy and is based down in Zurich, and led the Google differential privacy implementations when they first did theirs. And now is at a really cool startup called Tumult Labs. And they have a Spark-based open source differential privacy library that you can use at this moment that you can install. And I was one of their beta testers. It's a really cool library. So yeah, can recommend.
What's the difference between like anonymization and what you just described? Because I guess we can take a data set with some private information, like, I don't know, emails, phone numbers, geographical locations. So this information that we can use to identify a specific person. And we just, I don't know, hash this data using some sort of like MD5 hash or something.
Okay.
Like, is it not enough? Like, are we not like within this differential privacy thing?
So yeah, so like those are kind of like the old, what I would call like more old school methods of anonymization. And people might have also heard about like K anonymity was another kind of what I call like an old school definition of anonymization. It's just like, oh, I dropped all the personally identifiable information, so it's anonymized. And I think what Dwork and numerous folks after were able to prove is that doesn't actually cover anything about anonymization, because yeah, if you don't release any data, so you don't release any of the attached rows or other information from the data set, sure, that then you can call it anonymized because no information is released. But depending on how you release your groups and what other information is in there, again, like we were talking about, there's quite a few things that are personally identifiable, like what apps you use, what phone you use, your browser, this and that, whatever. That if you don't remove all those too, then that's just more information leakage. And this is why people that are outliers have a special amount of privacy risk, because if, let's say, there's one row in the data set that you're releasing where somebody is singled out, so to speak, these can lead to all different types of privacy attacks that people can perform. One of the great ones around de-anonymization was the Netflix prize, in which Narayanan and Shmatinov, I think I pronounced it right, were able to prove that they de-anonymized or they re-identified a group of reviews that Netflix released, and they said they were anonymized, and they had just done exactly what you said. They're just like, yeah, we totally anonymized it. So,
like at DataTalks.Club, we run courses, and then as a part of that, we, like when students submit their homework, we ask things like, hey, how much time did you spend on this homework? How much time did you spend on watching lectures? Or like the answers, all that. And then at some point we release this data, so then others can explore it. And what we did is we took the email and just applied SHA-1 hashing
with salt.
emails without. Okay. Is this bad? Can we be
We can do a
Should I
privacy
go and-
analysis later. You show me the script you use, I'll help you out. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, did you do any other randomization of the data or anything? Okay.
No.
Um,
But it was
I mean,
like not so much data. So we had this information, how much time they spent on different activities, that plus anonymized email. So we can identify that this is the same user across different modules of the course.
yeah. And again, like I think probably people have opted in for this by using the site and by submitting the form. So I think like I'm not here to try to give you legal advice. I'm also not a lawyer. But there's ways that there's
You should have
ways
said this
that
from the very beginning of this interview.
there's ways that we can offer a bit more privacy for the users, or also like, so consent, right? Like people that say like, I want my data used, or I want my data used with anonymization, or I only want this data used or for these things. But essentially differential privacy as a mechanism. So we use certain algorithms to implement differential privacy and then release data. It can help you actually reason like, what's the privacy loss of each individual? And it can start to cap individuals at a certain point in time. And there's a cool graphic in the book, and also in Damien has a blog series, Introduction to Differential Privacy. But there's a cool graphic where you can actually start to view the probability distribution of the different values of certain parameters we use to tune differential privacy. And you can actually then sit there and reason and say like, how much privacy are we willing to have so that this data can still have high information, high utility, but tune it and maybe even you could tune it on an individual level if you ever wanted to give that option for people. But I mean, if you have a iOS device, differential privacy is already running on your phone. Or on whatever iOS device you have. So this is something that's been deployed in quite large scale ways at a lot of the larger tech companies. And I think it's more usable now for those of us that didn't get PhDs in differential privacy and kind of how we can experiment and use them. So I have a few notebooks for the book too. There's a repository. It's like if you want to play around. There's I think 3 or 4 notebooks on building your own differential privacy mechanism, and then one notebook using the Tumult Analytics library, which I found to be the most user friendly of the ones I reviewed for the book.
Now I'm kind of a bit freaking out right now, thinking like, go ahead and delete everything. Like, am I breaking any laws?
No, I sorry, I don't want to like scare people with this information. I want people to feel empowered. I want people to feel empowered. No, I think so. Look, like some of it is about intention and awareness, and I think folks who participate in the club like understand. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's when I try like an FAQ, there's an FAQ chapter of the book because I get a lot of questions on this stuff. And one of the FAQs is like, oh no, like we released data and we didn't apply any of this stuff. What do I do? And it's like, just think about it the next time. It's not gonna nobody's gonna die, hopefully. Nobody's gonna get arrested, hopefully. And just I meant based on your data release, and hopefully, just the next time, like have a think through it. And I think honestly, if people just started writing up some privacy requirements as part of the normal data science process, that in and of itself would solve like 95% of the issues we have. It's just actually sitting there and thinking for a second, is there more privacy we can offer, or should we offer people the chance to opt out, or can we try out a cool new library that we heard? And just start to build it in. It's the same thing as like everybody talking about building CI/CD for data science processes, building testing into data science processing, building validation. I mean, these are all concepts that we can slowly work into our workflow, and nobody's gonna report you. I'm definitely not gonna report you.
And some of the students listen to this and is freaking out, please just reach out to me and I will remove your data. Don't sue me, please. What do you think about ChatGPT? Like, how privacy preserving is it?
It's been interesting. So I have a newsletter on data privacy and machine learning. So I have the past 2 issues. I just only wrote about ChatGPT, and you heard about it. It was banned in Italy for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
not anymore?
Not anymore. So cool. Here's an amazing privacy story, everybody. ChatGPT was banned in Italy. And I don't know if you remember the big privacy leak that happened, but some users were logged in and they could see other people's chat histories. And this happened, I don't know, a month and a half ago or something.
I've heard about
And
that.
you could see the chat histories of other people, and people started sharing screenshots, and then they took down history for a while, and then they put it back up after they got it fixed. But in that time period, they actually had to notify people in Europe whose data was exposed if they found that there was private information in the chat histories. It's a good job, GDPR, that it exists, right? So there's a win. And so some people got notified, and there was things like email addresses, credit card numbers. There was all of this private data that people were feeding into ChatGPT. And
Why would you put credit card information in ChatGPT?
You're probably copying and pasting from internal emails or something like this, right? Or other stuff. And
yeah, because like you don't care about this. Like, what is going to
you
happen?
do. But this is the problem, is like
right?
people are just copying and pasting anything into ChatGPT.
Is it
which
ChatGPT's fault or ours?
It's it is definitely not the user's fault when privacy comes into question, because I think the thing that we have to think through is like, if we don't build things so that it's easy for people to do the easiest path is secure, the easiest path, is private, or at least gives people consent options, right? This is how we have to design stuff, because people are going to use stuff however is easiest for them to use it. And if there's a big text box and it says, hey, I'll help you write email responses, people are going to put their email in it. That's exactly what they're going to do. And there's even like open AI people being like, please do that. And so they have to assume that people are going to do this. Anyways, they got notified, and Italy was like, absolutely not. We're shutting this down. And so Italy shut it down and said, you have until the end of the month to comply, to prove you complied. And it was literally like a day or two before the end of the month. That's when they launched the turn history on and off. So now you can turn history off, which is what they should have done in the first place, but they didn't. But at least you can turn history off. And that was, I think, like some of my writing on ChatGPT from the start was, hey, let's not even touch GPT 3, 3.5, and 4, and how much private information is in that. We're going to leave that for a second. That's another ballpark. But let's just talk about the interface and how you roll it out. And, I used it a little bit in the beginning to try to see how all of it worked, obviously, and see if I could get it to tell me interesting things. And one of the things I noticed, they're like, please do not put personal information here, like a tiny little. Okay, I don't think anybody read that. So some of it is just like how you communicate to the user. And I think most people didn't know that it's obviously people who work in machine learning know, but they don't know it's a reinforcement learning system that's like under active training. So any of your chats can be used at any point in time to optimize the reinforcement learning with human feedback, right, system that's underlying it. And the amount of probably like proprietary, confidential, and personal data that's now in that reinforcement learning system, or several of them, they have probably a big job to figure out and sort that in any way.
They will need to identify that in their historical data, like in all these logs, they have like credit card information, addresses, email addresses, I don't know, dates of birth, and all this kind of identifiable information. They will need to mask it, right? So like put placeholders there, and then only then use it for reinforcement learning.
Yeah, that's an ideal like first step, right? And I think the other thing to question is like, do they have, under what consent was that collected? So is it allowed to be stored for a long time and used for training? Is there a retention period for that? Were people informed? How can people delete it? So like there has to be deletion abilities. And then one of the things, I don't know if you saw too, but Amazon corporate lawyers had to send out a big memo to Amazon and start doing mitigation with OpenAI, because there was internal proprietary Amazon documents that they found in ChatGPT because people were using it. So again, I don't blame any users, because users want to do what users want to do. That's the whole point of offering a service. It's OpenAI's responsibility, and now Microsoft's responsibility in a lot of ways, to actually build a user interface and machine learning system where they think about this stuff and they make it a little bit easier to use, so that I say like we should respect and protect even the most irresponsible user, because that's part of our job. That's the responsibility we take on when we give somebody a huge text box and we say, go to town. So
yeah, I'm just realized how irresponsible it was on me when I recently got a contract. So I had a contract, and I'm not a lawyer. I thought, okay, let's ask ChatGPT what it thinks about this contract. Like, are there any, suspicious parts? So I took the contract, Control A, Control C, Control V to ChatGPT and asked, hey, like, is this a good contract? And they said, I'm not a lawyer, but this contract looks fine. And now when you talk about these people who put credit card information there, and I think like I'm the same. Like I just took the entire contract, put it there without realizing what could actually happen with this information.
Yeah, but again, like I don't think the responsibility should ever lie on the user. You know, you're doing exactly the way the product is designed to be used. It is not your fault that it's not thought through. How you could be like, oh, hey, for this interaction, could you just forget everything that I'm going to tell you? Which should be available. One of the other cool things I learned with the Italian stuff and everything going on, and obviously I've been advising a few different groups of folks on how to use ChatGPT in a more compliant manner. And I think one of the coolest things is that Azure launched the ability to localize ChatGPT for you. So not only is it localized in your whatever your Azure cluster or cloud looks like, so the data is not being sent to the US, which is a part of fulfilling some of the GDPR requirements. But then also you can even do fine tuning and have an individual reinforcement learning system on top of the underlying language model. And all of that is yours. You actually own that. So I think that's pretty cool and maybe something that for people that are using it is worthwhile putting some money into the Azure credit machines so that you have your own ChatGPT. And of course, there's like a million open source repos where people try to recreate some of these things. I'm excited to see how that develops over time.
Okay, I realized that we're slightly over time,
Oh yeah.
and there is unfortunately one question that we did not cover. So, but yeah, maybe next time. But one thing I wanted to ask you before we finish
Mhm.
is if I want to learn more about this topic. Of course, there is a book that I can go and read. Is there anything else you would recommend in addition to the book that would be useful for me to check if I want to learn more about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I will mention that my
GDPR.Club?
newsletter is called Probably Private, probablyprivate.com. So you can check it out. I'll try to cover things there. I know I mentioned Damien's work earlier. You can find him online if you search TED on privacy or Damien Desfontaines. His work is really amazing around differential privacy. And there's a bunch of cool references in the book to like a million other people's whose work I really love and admire. So if you go on Amazon right now, you can preview the book up to the end of the first chapter. You can also do that on ebooks.com. And so if you look through those, you'll see a bunch of references to the beginning concepts. And I'm thinking of promoting a series called What Does It Mean to Be a Privacy Engineer, and interviewing some of my colleagues, peers, and also folks whose work I admire. So maybe stay tuned in and you can see some blurbs on what does it mean to work in privacy.
And you will probably announce it in your newsletter, right? When you
Yeah,
start.
there and definitely on social media and so forth. So
Okay, so keep an eye on all social media accounts and the newsletter. And with that, that's all we have time for today. Thanks a lot for joining us today, for telling about all this. And I also realized how irresponsible I was in a few cases, which I guess is a good outcome. Yeah. And thanks everyone for joining us today too. So have a
thanks
great
so much. Thanks.